The Stanley Cup playoffs do not sleep, and neither do we. Welcome back to the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. The Edmonton Oilers have tied their series with Dallas Stars at one game apiece, going back to Edmonton for Game 3 on Sunday afternoon. It's Avery Lewis-McDougall here with Mike Agello and Kelsey Sirmaz here after the Oilers equalized that series in a game in which Stuart Skinner, y'all, Stu Skinner, he's back! 3 shutouts in the postseason. What a game for the Oilers as they got goals from guys like Brett Kulak. They got production from the top guys. And once again, Edmonton's depth was a key factor in this game. So we'll start off with you, Kelsey. Your thoughts on this game. Here's Edmonton. Sends it back to Alberta, all tied one game apiece.
I mean, what I'm getting from this series, Edmonton has pretty much outplayed Dallas for 5 periods of this series. Really, the only outlier period was that third period in Game 1 where Dallas scored 5 goals. So I think largely Edmonton's carrying most of the 5-on-5 play. You know, special teams have been a little bit messy for them. We saw them kind of hunker down on the penalty kill today, which was a drastic difference from Game 1 and a really big deal because that obviously was what shifted the momentum in Game 1. So they didn't really allow that to happen today. They weren't really giving the Stars much. Even on the power play, the Stars couldn't really generate anything. And as you said, I mean, it's been a Jekyll and Hyde act with Stuart Skinner this postseason. You know, there was a crazy stat out there that Stuart Skinner's either at a shutout or a sub 834 save percentage in this postseason. So right now we're getting Jekyll. Who knows if Hyde's going to show back up.
Right, it's fun. Like you never know what you're gonna get with Stuart Skinner. Like when he's on, he's on. There's no in between. There's no middle ground for Stuart. It's either that rough night or it's the night where he could be a Conn Smythe winning goaltender. It's always funny to see. I mentioned special teams there, how the penalty kill is a lot better, but the power play tonight on the road, the power play or this postseason he had been struggling, but they scored in the power play now in back-to-back games. Michael, your thoughts on the power play? Edmonton striking again as Ryan Nugent-Hopkins got a power play goal tonight to give the Oilers the early lead.
Well, the power play was 0 for 27 on the road going into Game 1. Mm-hmm. And then they score power play goals in consecutive road games. So, I mean, that's encouraging for Edmonton. But, you know, Edmonton outplayed Dallas and they deserved the win. But all 3 goals were not exactly clean goals, especially the first one where the shot from Evan Bouchard went off Rupe Hintz' stick and went right to Nugent Hopkins, who beat Ottinger, but Ottinger wasn't out of position. It was a deflection. But that's the way the playoffs are. I mean, you're not going to get clean goals where you're going to pick top corner. It's going to go off somebody's shin pad or off their skate or whatever. But I think the one encouraging thing for Dallas is that, you know, none of the goals were exactly like works of art. And, you know, I think they'll probably, you know, like in Game 1, they'll probably get some breaks down the line in this series.
They most likely will. But tonight, almost every break, with Edmonton's way, you mentioned right there that knuckle puck that finds a way to Nugent Hopkins' stick, the Brett Kulak goal. Every single bounce found a way to come to Edmonton. And once again, we saw the big thing at 5-on-5 is that Dallas having a hard time keeping up with McDavid and Draisaitl. You see when they're in perpetual motion, the Star defenders are always a step behind both these guys, and it makes them so tough to defend no matter who you are.
Well, yeah. I'll just say this, Kelsey. You know, a couple years ago when Edmonton was snuffed out by Vegas, Vegas seemed to have the blueprint of how to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl, and that was beat the hell out of them. That was like check them at every single moment. Now, it's tough to catch McDavid. I realize that, but nobody has repeated that. And except, you know, Florida did for the first three games of the Stanley Cup final last year. And then they sort of let them go. And then, you know, Edmonton climbed back. But I mean, Dallas really, I think if they're going to win this series, they have to start putting a physical pounding on Draisaitl and McDavid, because then by game 5 or game 6 of the series, since Chris Knobloch plays them 23, 24 minutes a night, they're going to be spent. But if you don't, then they're going to run rampant and they're going to kill you.
Yeah, it is so true. And it's funny enough, Michael, you mentioned how they run rampant, but it's funny because, again, another game where Edmonton wins, and most of the scoring didn't come from those two. Kelsey, your thoughts on Oilers' depth once again having a big say in this game, with guys like Brett Kulak having a big night again, too, because Edmonton has been carried a large part in this postseason by everybody else not wearing those two jerseys on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, their depth's really coming through in this series. And when you're looking at these two rosters, I mean, the depth kind of screams in Dallas's favor, I think, just through the 4 lines. But I think Edmonton's blue line's really coming through in this series too. We saw that from Kulak tonight, and they're activating, they're really involved. And honestly, that's what makes Edmonton thrive. In addition to the McDry effect, is just this presence from their blue and their ability to activate. So I think we're seeing that from them. And I think for Dallas, back to Mike's point, they just have to get more physical in this series. And I think that's a big thing for them. They're a big team. This isn't a small team either. Dallas has the ability to play that way. I don't think they're doing that enough. And I do agree that that's really the only way to neutralize these guys, because they're just going to keep running rampant throughout this series and pretty much imposing their will if nobody's going to physically put a stop to it. So, I think their depth's coming through better than I expected it to. But we'll see how Dallas responds, because I do still think Dallas has the deeper team here.
Well, we'll definitely see. And a big thing, too, for Dallas is that they're going to have to get some more shots on net. You're not going to win a series getting less than 3 shots on net and Stuart Skinner. We saw, again, Edmonton finding ways to get bodies in front, finding ways to neutralize Dallas's offense. I think a big thing, Michael, is that you're gonna need again for Dallas those big guns. You're going to need offense from guys like Sagan, Bennett, etc., to find a way to win Game 3, Michael.
Well, I looked at this series at the very beginning, and I thought the advantage was, I mean, granted, Edmonton has depth up front, after getting Evander Kane back at the end of the year. But I thought Dallas's depth was superior, especially their 3rd and 4th line, when Sagan and Ben are playing on their 3rd and 4th line. These guys used to be front liners, but they really haven't, short of Sagan and that breakaway in game 1, they really haven't made, Jamie Benn has looked a stride or two too slow to do anything. And when Jamie Benn can't catch up to you, then he relies on, his other quality, which is being a cheap shot artist. And that's what he did to Scheifele in the Winnipeg series. So I'm waiting for that inner Brad Marchand to come out of Jamie Benn, and him to do something where he probably will take a penalty, but it might be beneficial to the Dallas Stars, because they need Jamie Benn being that guy, being that rambunctious sort of guy.
Yeah, it's when he's at his best as leader of this Dallas Stars hockey club. Of course, a reminder, Playoff Frenzy Live is provided by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on Sticks? You can get pro level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com. That's Stix.com. Head over there and gear up. Now, I want a question for the both of you. And is there a more snake bitten player this postseason than Matthias Janmark? Because he had a chance right there in front to make it 4-0 and couldn't cash. And he's had chances all postseason long, point blank range, great looks, and he just can't score. Is there a more snake bitten guy in the postseason than Janmark for either of you?
No, I'm not sure there is. I think Wyatt Johnston really needs to get going for Dallas too. I think he did have, a few chances in the 3rd period there to generate something, but I have to agree with you. I mean, Janmark's just snake bitten. I couldn't believe he missed that opportunity. Wide open net, he hits the post, and then, second opportunity there. So yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I don't think there is, to be honest.
I'll go to the other series in the playoffs right now. In the first 2 games, nobody's more snake bit than Freddie Anderson, after Freddie Anderson was all world, and now he's Freddie Anderson. He's the playoff Freddie Avery that we saw for 5 years in Toronto, who couldn't stop a beach ball if his life depended on it.
No, that's a great answer because yeah, Free Anderson, he's someone who I love to see with Carolina, and now he's turned back into that Free Anderson. It's like, oh boy, what's going on here? What's happening here? And I know we talked pre-show. I know we're gonna get to it here. I know Michael wants to get to it badly. It is the play that saw Rupe Hintz and Darnell Nurse battling in front. Hintz checks. Hintz slashes Nurse. Nurse slashes Hintz back. He goes down. He goes down the tunnel. Doesn't return. We don't know about Rupe Hintz's condition right now. We don't know what his status is for Game 3. But that was a play, Michael. We mentioned off before the show began. You under suspended for that play.
Well, because I mean, okay, first of all, they reviewed it as a major and then lowered it to a minor, which is consistent with the terrible officiating that we've seen across the board in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They've, there have been situations where players have been suspended where I didn't think they deserved to be suspended, and then they were, fined for something they should have been suspended 3 games for. And this one, I mean, we don't know how it's gonna pan out. I have a feeling that based on the extent of Hintz's injury, and we won't probably know that until Sunday morning. Before the game, and I think it's 3:00 in the afternoon on Sunday. If he's out for a significant amount of games, then Darnell Nurse should be suspended because it was a retaliatory swing. Hintz did a cross check across the back of Nurse, but that cross check was basically like you see it like 50 times in a playoff game, and like everybody cross checks everybody, but the response from Nurse was a baseball swing to the lower extremities of Rupe Hintz, and he went down like a sack of potatoes and had to be helped off the ice. I don't think he was doing his best Daniel Day-Lewis imitation. This was, him possibly having a broken ankle or something like that. And if it's like that and he's out for games, then so should Darnell Nurse.
And the thing you mentioned that NHL and where it comes to calls, we know this league doesn't like calling doesn't like calling suspensions in the postseason for longer than a game. So I doubt if there's any discipline for Darnell Nurse, it's probably going to be a fine, maybe a game, but anything beyond that, I don't see it happening. Kelsey, what are your thoughts on that play with Rupe Hintz and Darnell Nurse?
Yeah, I am agreeing with Michael. I didn't like it at all. I'm not one to say you suspend based on the injury or whatnot, but this was a vicious slash, and it kind of reminded me of a couple years ago when everybody was going for Leon Draisaitl's ankles. When he had that high ankle sprain. And, that's like he said, that cross check before that happens 100 times in a game. And, that was just a vicious slash, completely uncalled for. I was a little bit surprised they brought it back to 2 minutes there. But just based on the fact that, they called it a 2-minute on the ice, I just doubt any meaningful discipline is going to come from it. Like you said, probably a fine. I wouldn't even guarantee that there's going to be a game. I don't think there's going to be a suspension here.
And the problem right there is that we know for a very long time under the George Parros regime, there has been no consistency when it comes to plays like this. Like, one thing could be one game, one thing could be a fine, one thing could be no punishment at all. And all we all want with this from this league is some consistency, which we don't get. It's ridiculous.
No, and Brendan Shanahan is out of a job in Toronto. Brian Burke is doing broadcasting and things like that. They did better jobs at the head of the Department of Player Safety than George Parros, who I start to think he's still suffering post-concussion symptoms from the last game of his NHL career when Colton Orr knocked him silly. That's the way he's managed the Department of Player Safety, because he's been completely inconsistent, and I think it's been a disgrace in this playoffs the way that they have called suspendable plays. So if Brendan's looking for a job, George's might be available in a couple months.
That's bold. That is a bold take, but you know what? I can't disagree that George Parros has not been doing a good job in that role in NHL player safety. And so now the series is tied at 1 game apiece. And I'll ask you, Kelsey, how big was it to Edmonton to get us to get a win in Dallas? Because I know Edmonton's been the comeback kings all postseason long, but how big is it to go out to Edmonton 1-1 as opposed to fighting back for being down in a possible 0-2 hole now?
I mean, this is a really big win for Edmonton anyway you slice it, especially after the way the game one ended. That kind of left a bad taste in their mouth. They needed to get right back on track, and they did that. They had a really good response game. And I think that says a lot to the resiliency of this group because, you give up 5 goals in the third period. There's a lot of different ways it can go in the very next game. And the nice thing, too, for Edmonton here, and I think this will work in Edmonton's favor, not so much in Dallas's favor, is this is a quick turnaround for game 3 going into Edmonton. They play at 3 p.m. on Sunday, and that's Eastern time. So they're not going to have a whole lot of time to regroup and, get their faculties together. And in terms of Dallas, you don't know what that status is going to be for Rupe Hintz. That's a huge loss if he's out of the lineup, especially since, like Michael suggested earlier, that their depth hasn't shown up really. So, I think this is good for Edmonton. This is going to be a quick turnaround, and I expect them to come out flying in game 3 as well. But this is just a really big win to kind of get them back track after it went off the rails a little bit in game 1.
And then Hins is a Selke Trophy caliber a two-way forward, and probably not solely responsible for shutting down McDavid. But if you're going to match up a center against McDavid or Draisaitl, if they split them up and they're on 2 separate lines, Hins is going to go up against one of them. And if he is out, then now you're going to have Wyatt Johnston, who is a smaller player, who can be overpowered by a guy like Draisaitl. It's going to really hurt them. I still think Dallas can win this series because I have no confidence whatsoever in Stuart Skinner. One day he's Terry Sawchuk, the next day he's Hardy Astrom. So and that's just the reality. If the guy has 3 shutouts and then has a goal, a save percentage of .834, I think Kelsey said, that's pretty hideous. So, and there's no consistency there, and I don't know if you can have confidence in a goalie like that. I think Chris Knobloch is praying for Calvin Pickard's whatever lower body injury to be healed with magic hands, because they would have an option because they can't go to Oliver Rodriguez. They're stuck with Stuart Skinner right now.
Yeah. And I was just going to say too, just the one thing though, I think with Edmonton is I think their defense has surprisingly come around a little bit. I mean, we saw that in this game. That's been a point of contention for a lot of people when talking about the Edmonton Oilers for the last several years. And honestly, I think they played a really solid defensive hockey game today. So if they can keep that up, Dallas didn't, pepper Skinner with shots today. There were 25 shots on goal for each side. Dallas actually had more giveaways than shots today, so that says a lot. But Edmonton's defense, as long as they can continue to get it done and play the way that they did tonight, I don't know that the Stuart Skinner factor is going to be as large. But I'll tell you what, that save in the third period, what a save that was, that stick save. So I don't know. It depends on the version of Skinner they get, but I think with the way Edmonton's defense is playing, that might be a little bit less of a factor.
Yeah, no, Stewart makes some big saves, especially when it came to saves in high danger areas. He actually played really well tonight when making those key saves for Edmonton. So we have a few of the comments here. One from our colleague, Hockey News, John Toval. He had a comment earlier that pointed out that Jason Robertson has 2 points in 8 games. That is a shocker. That is stunning to see. He's been neutralized in large part of this postseason, gang.
Well, I mean, you have to remember that the injury that he suffered, I mean, in the final game of the regular season, we don't know how close to 100%. And based on the fact that he has 2 points in 8 games, I would say nowhere close to 100%. So he's doing it on guts. I know he was interviewed before game 2. And they asked him how close to 100% he was, and he didn't want to say anything because you don't say. He says, "I'm out there. I just need to do what I need to do." It's like, okay, yeah, everybody plays in the playoffs, but their effectiveness can be, I mean, he's just not the player that he was before the injury. But I'll say this: Miro Heiskanen looks like Miro Heiskanen, and that's going to be a big key to this series, is him being able to play 20, 21, 22 minutes a night. And Thomas Harley has stepped up to be a number 1 level defenseman. They're going to need both of those guys playing at a high level if they're going to beat Edmonton.
And that's the big thing right there, that those are the key cogs in the back end for Dallas. But when you go deeper down that depth chart for the Dallas Stars, it isn't pretty. That's the thing in which Edmonton's forward core doesn't have talent to exploit the rest of that Dallas back end, because when you get past Harley and Heiskanen, it's not a pretty look, gang. It isn't a great look on the back end for the Stars beyond those two guys.
Well, I was a little surprised tonight that they scratched Lyubushkin, unless there was an injury, that they scratched Ilya Lyubushkin and put in Alex Petrovic, because Lyubushkin, he's a playoff tested right shot defenseman, physical. His speed is not great, and maybe but Alex Petrovic isn't exactly Bobby Orr either. So it's like I was a little surprised. And Liam Bichsel is a rookie. He's a big rookie, but if he's going to be in the lineup, then he needs to be physical. He was backing off in a confrontation with Vasily Podkolzin. You need to rub that guy's face in the ice if you're Liam Bichsel. If you're not, then get out of the lineup and put somebody in there that can do that.
Yeah, no,
and I've liked Decent Lindell in this series too. I just want to throw that out there. And I think he can be a difference maker too if he, continues to play pretty well.
Mm-hmm. So now I'll ask both of you now going into Game 3, and this question for both sides of Edmonton and Dallas. I'll ask you first, Kelsey. What player you want to see more from the Edmonton and Dallas side, from both ends of these teams here?
For Dallas, I mentioned him earlier. I think Wyatt Johnston needs to get going. I liked the way he played as this game rolled on. He was getting some chances, but we're just simply not seeing the version of him that we saw in the regular season, even at the beginning of these playoffs. So I'd like to see him contribute a little bit more. His production just simply needs to be a little bit better. During the broadcast, they mentioned his plus-minus number, and that's a -15, worst mark in the playoffs. I just think he needs to be a lot better on both sides of the puck. And on the Edmonton side, I'm going to go honestly with Janmark. I know these are both two players we both mentioned, but I'd like to see a few more guys on Edmonton's side, like Janmark, contributing a little bit more on the score sheet as well. But honestly, I think both of these teams are pretty deep. There's not too many passengers, I don't think. Robertson, we mentioned, only has 2 points in these 8 games, but given his injury, that's kind of, he's not playing 100% like Michael said. So I'm not seeing too many passengers in this series, to be honest. But if I had to pull 2 guys, those would probably be my 2 guys there.
Fair. Well, and Michael, over to you. Who are your guys you want to see someone from Edmonton and from Dallas?
Well, people are going to look at or hear what I'm going to say and shake their head, but for Dallas, Mikko Rantanen, because Mikko Rantanen has been a dominating force throughout the playoffs, but he had an assist in Game 1 and he was held pointless and -1 in Game 2. So especially if Hintz is out for an extended period, they're going to need Rantanen to put on his red cape and his blue tights and score a hat trick to get dig his team out of the hole. And some guy wears 97. He's been dominating, but he only has 3 assists, and they need him to score goals. Now they've been getting goals from Kulak, and they've been getting goals from Adam Henrique, but they're not getting goals from McDavid. And I think McDavid, if they're going to win this series, they're going to need him to, again, be the 97 that we saw in the Four Nations and we always see. But he hasn't, he hit a post tonight, but they need him to score goals.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Great answer. And the point of McDavid, it's funny because the Oilers, they're here in the conference finals. They're here in the Final Four, and McDavid, right there, Michael, hasn't been scoring. That should scare an opposing team. That the Oilers are here in the Final Four, and McDavid's scoring has been quieted. That's a scary thought that he's not scoring. They're still doing this well in the postseason, gang.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does the rest of this series. You can tell that the Jets are on, though. I think it's a matter of time before he comes around. I thought he was really, really good in this game. So I think it's only a matter of time before we see him, break out. I don't think this is going to be something where he's going to be quote unquote snake bitten for long, because this isn't really snake bitten for most players, but for McDavid, maybe so.
Yeah, no. Connor McDavid will find a way to break out eventually in this series. And one more time, Playoff Frenzy Live and Hockey News is presented by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks? We can get pro-level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com. That's Stix.com. Head over and gear up. Now, I want to go to a funnier question for the both of you. I'll start with you, Michael. Now, one of the bigger things we've seen in the postseason has been fans going wild in the moss pit outside Rogers Place. Now, let me ask you this, Michael. Would you watch a full game in the moss pit? Would you go down there and watch a full game? I've been there, mate. It's fun. Would you watch a game in the moss pit?
As a reporter, I covered the Maple Leaf Square in 2017 when they played the Capitals. That's the last time I would ever go in one of those situations. First of all, you're watching a game on a big screen. That's not great. Second of all, I'm a reporter, so I'm not going to be breaking out the blue and orange pom-poms like the fans in Edmonton. They're paying customers, or they're fanatics like the fans at Maple Leaf Square. I just don't find it, really that sort of palatable, but I get it. I get, for young people out there, they want to be all together. They can't spend the money to get in the building. And then in this case, they're in Edmonton and the games are in Dallas. But yeah, it doesn't do that much for me. So I'm an old guy. So there you go.
How about you, Kelsey? Would you watch him in the moss pit?
Hey, I am a young person, and I can also agree with Michael that it's not my scene, especially as a reporter, but even as a fan, I have crowd anxiety, so I I don't think that would be the best place for me. But yeah, it's a wild atmosphere though. I've been to a couple of them in the past as a fan back before my reporting days, but definitely now as a reporter, I'm much better either in the comfort of the press box or in my home. So
I'll say for the record, a couple of years ago for a teach, and I did a story on the moss pit. I watched most of one game in 2022 from the moss pit, and I'll say as much. Standing in that crowd in about 80-degree weather in a blazer wasn't fun. It was hot, it was sweaty, and it was wall-to-wall people. So that's the one thing I'll say. If you've never been to a moss pit before, be prepared to sweat because it gets hot very quickly, and avoid the flying beers. When Edmonton scores, fans throw beers in the air, so you have to duck. So, word of advice if you ever do come through a game in Edmonton.
The last time I was in a mosh pit, I was at a Soundgarden concert. So there you go.
Again, Mike's showing his age on the broadcast. And again, he's made.
I was about to say I was at a Jonas Brothers concert. So that's the. There's the contradiction right there.
I'm not saying anything. I'm younger as well too, but again, Soundgarden references, Hardy Ashram references, you're just seeing how Mike and he's just showing his age right now tonight on the show. But getting back on track with the comments, another question here from our boy John. So he asks, who wins tomorrow night between Florida and Carolina? I'll start with you, Kelsey. Who do you have in Game 3 of Florida and Carolina?
I got Florida. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I just don't think Carolina has a solution for this team. And I'm not sure that anybody does. Florida is unlike any team in this league, and they're unlike any playoff team. If I could pick a perfect playoff team, it's the Florida Panthers. I just don't think Carolina has an answer for them because Florida kind of has this knack for being able to play whatever game the game demands. If it's a run and gun style game, they can play that game. If they have to shut the other team down, they can do that too. We saw that in Game 2. They weren't giving Carolina any space whatsoever. So I'm just, unless Carolina makes some big adjustments, I just don't see it happening. I think they may get swept again. Maybe they win one game. But I think that's the road we're heading down. Because I think the Florida Panthers are too much for them. There's too much depth on that team. And they kind of beat them at their own game too. I think the only way that Carolina might have a shot is if they get ahead early, capitalize on some early opportunities. Because it is hard to chase a game against the Hurricanes because of the shutdown style of defense they play. So if they can get ahead in the game, they might have a shot at, winning a game or two. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm taking Florida in the next game, and I will take them in Game 4 probably too, because I just don't see Carolina beating them.
All right, turn to you, Michael. Do the Hurricanes break their current 0-14 skid in Eastern Final, or does Florida roll again? Is there any hope for Carolina? Is there any hope for the Hurricanes tomorrow night?
No. Carolina is the Toronto Maple Leafs of the Eastern Conference Final. I still cannot believe that the last time the Carolina Hurricanes won an Eastern Conference Final game, Rod Brindamore scored the game-winning goal. It was Game 7 against Buffalo in 2006, which is it's incredible. I mean, this is a pretty good franchise, but they get to that level and then they can't get any further. And Shane Gostisbehere, if he gets out, and he's from Florida, if he gets out of his home state alive, it'll be a miracle, because they after shooting it at Brad Marchand, he is public enemy number one. They will go at him every single chance they get.
No, they absolutely will. And with that being said, we're going to wrap things up here on the Hockey News for Playoff Frenzy Live. I'm Avery Lewis McDougall with Mike Agello and Kelsey Surmas. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Have a good night. We're out.